Hey friends. Okay, so I am recording this video because I have something that I need to share, and it's very important. Um, there are actually many things that I've become aware of in these past couple months that I feel very strongly that I need to share with my friends, with my family, with anyone who has eyes to see and ears to hear. And so it's a lot. It's a lot of things. Just about the times that we're living in, and how it ends. Um, but I guess thinking about where to start, it's hard to know where to start. So I guess I will just start with telling you a little bit about my journey and how I got, I guess, to where I am. Just so you have a little background on me. And so I'll just start with, I was born in Hutch. I went to St. A's, baptized in the Catholic Church. I did baptize, like I said, baptized, and yeah, just baptism in the Catholic Church. Went to kindergarten, sorry, in the Catholic Church. And then my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved to Oklahoma, and we lived there for a few years, I think. I was very young. My sister was born at that time. And then my dad got sent overseas. We lived in Saudi Arabia for a few years. So I spent first, second, and the beginning of third grade in Saudi Arabia. We lived in Riyadh. And then the desert storm happened. Women and children were evacuated. So I moved back with my mom. And, when we were in Saudi, we weren't allowed to have any, practice religion. So we didn't really talk about God a lot, or at all. I don't remember any significant conversations about God. But anyway, we come back and I'm living with my mom. She's not religious at all. So we didn't go to church. Um, I started to, um, be exposed to a lot of this like new agey stuff at a young age. I remember when I was like 10 or 12, something like that. I remember doing meditations and different things like that with friends. And so this whole, spirituality thing, it had always intrigued me, but I was not a Christian. I, we would go my dad came back from Desert Storm, and I ended up moving and living with him, and his family was all Catholic. So we would go to like Christmas and, Easter, but I didn't like going because I had never gotten my first communion. I, couldn't take communion. And so I just felt very judged, having to sit in the pew while everyone went up. And so I decided I wanted to go through the catechism to get my first communion. And so I started the process, but like I said, I was already kind of, interested in spiritual things. And I had my own kind of ideas about how God is all love and all this stuff. And so going through the catechism, it was a lot of, from what I remember, and this is a long time ago, but it was very like, God is, you know, full of wrath and all this stuff, and, you're gonna burn in hell if you don't, whatever. And so I was immediately turned off by it, and I quit going. And that was really the end of religion for me for a long time. I met my husband, who at the time was what I would have considered a Jesus freak. We used to sing songs. We used to have a band, and he would write songs about Jesus. I couldn't even sing the songs because I felt like a hypocrite because I didn't believe any of that stuff. And I was very much, like I said, into New Agey, into the law of attraction, Reiki, quantum physics, all this stuff was super interesting to me. And so a friend of mine had told me about a school that was called the Meta Institute. You could go and you could become a therapeutic coach, which was like he used, NLP, neuro linguistic programming, hypnosis, and all this stuff to try to like unlock your unconscious mind and things like that. So I went through that, got the certification and everything, and yeah, I was gonna open up my own practice and all this stuff. But anyway, in that class, which the certification, I think it was like 9 months or something like that, and we went, one weekend a month, and this whole time that I'm going, I keep having this dream that I'm jumping. And so I jump, and I come down slowly, and then I jump a little higher, and then I come down again slowly. And sometimes when I would jump, I would hit a wall, and then I would bounce off, and I hit another wall, and I didn't have any control over the situation. And so one of our teachers could interpret dreams. And so I asked her one day, what does this mean? And all she said to me was, well, what's up? And immediately I knew, well, God is up, and I realized that I had been seeking, falling short, and hitting walls, going, looking in the wrong places for God. And so I had this like realization that maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot. Maybe this isn't, what I'm looking for. Um, and I had never really prayed before. But I prayed that night and I just said, Jesus, if you're real, I'm sorry. Please just like show me, help me to, know that you're real. And I just remember feeling this like peace, like everything was okay, everything was good. And I just, like it was different. I just felt changed. And so after that, I ended up, actually, I got a job at a place that I was like all gung ho about, doing coaching or whatever. I was actually a receptionist at a mental health place, but um, it was just a stepping stone for where, I was going. And anyway, it's a very long story, but I met some people there that got me plugged into a church and all this stuff. And I ended up getting baptized and learning. I got my first Bible like 12 years ago, and I started learning because I was teaching the preschoolers in Awana, the cubbies. And so I was learning the Bible studies from their perspective, which was great because I had never grown up with all the stories. People that grow up with the church, I think, kind of take some of that stuff for granted because, there's a lot of amazing stories that are in there that if you never read the Bible, you wouldn't know, right? And so it was, I got, like I said, baptized and everything, and it was growing my faith. And I started leading a group. And so I've been actively, pursuing God and, trying to learn in the Word. And I've been studying end times for a while. And because it's just very interesting to me, and I had always, assumed that, this dispensationalism, where the focus is on Israel and there's a 7-year tribulation and a rapture and a millennial reign and all this stuff. I always assumed that was true. And it was just the agreed upon, Christian eschatology. And recently I realized that there's a lot of different eschatologies out there, but what I was really looking for is like, I was trying to figure out who is Israel. So I got this book. Well, actually, it's, I got a set of these. So this is Prophets, and it's just a bunch of, just the prophets. And I was really excited to get those for Christmas. I started going through the prophets in January, and I had made it to Daniel. And that is when, and this whole time I'm trying to figure out, okay, who is Israel? Who's Israel? Because there's so many promises for Israel. So many different things revolve around Israel in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And it's like, what's Israel? And so trying to figure out who's Israel today was, I guess, my mission that I set out on. So I was searching the scriptures, trying to figure this out. And, it's like, is it the bloodlines that are descended from the 12 tribes? I mean, that would make sense, but everyone's mixed at this point. So how do you know who Israel is? And then, it's like, okay, well, what about, is it the people that live there? Well, those people could have been from wherever. They're Muslims or whatever. They're not Jews. Well, then is it just that you have to convert to Judaism? Is that what makes you Israel? So there's like all these questions, and none of them really add up, like, because everything's so intermingled now, and people are scattered, and it's like, where is Israel? Who's Israel? So I'm trying to figure this out. And then like this whole October 7th thing happens too. And during that time, it was interesting because, you have this, you've had this dialectic of left and right, good and evil and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, after October 7th, the massacre in Israel, you see like the right, who I was assumed like, oh, right supports Israel, they're conservative, they're, all this stuff. But I started to see that divide as well. And you had the Christian Zionists who were all about Israel and how this land belongs to them and all these things. And then you had the other side, the more the conspiratorial side, which was always the people that I followed. And so I didn't realize this whole thing against Israel until I started seeing this other side come up. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And I dove down some rabbit holes there. And let me tell you, there's a lot of rabbit holes on Israel. Holy cow. But anyway, and so I was beginning to see like, okay, this isn't adding up. Like there's something amiss here, right? And so then I'm reading through, like I said, the prophets. I get to Daniel, and I find this podcast. And the first video I watched was why the Jews are not God's chosen people. And I know, anti-Semitic, whatever. But it was very interesting, and it talked about the history of Israel, which, we don't really think about this. It says in Ecclesiastes that, there's nothing new under the sun, and what happened, generations ago, we forget those things, right? We don't remember, and so we fail to see the patterns, and we fail to learn from our history, right? When we don't recognize it. And so anyway, it was very interesting. And like the whole nation, how it actually came about again, and ties to the Rothschilds, and also tied to, the Catholic Church, which is really interesting. But anyway, and so I watched that and I was like, that's really interesting. I want to know more. So I started looking, and like this Dance of Life podcast has like, hundreds of videos out there and thousands of hours of content. And I'm like, holy cow, there's like this whole other like eschatology or way of interpreting even the Bible that I'd never known, because I always followed, this certain people. And so anyway, I went through the End Times series, which was very long, very thorough. I went through the Daniel and Revelation series. There's a lot of them. But what I found out, which was so interesting, is that Daniel is the key to Revelation. And that blew my mind. Because this whole 7-year tribulation thing, the millennial reign, the Antichrist comes and makes, a sacrifice or of abomination, desolate, all these things that they say are going to happen in this last like week or whatever, 7 years, week, whatever, of Daniel is supposed to happen, in the future. But what I found out, and this is the amazing thing, what I found out is that was fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus is the one that confirmed the covenant. It talks about in Daniel's 70th week that, this person will come and confirm a covenant, put an end to sacrifice. Well, yeah, Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice, so he put an end to that, and then it ended, the 70th week ended was when Stephen was stoned. And so that is the point where the gospel went out to the Gentiles, because first the Jew, then the Gentile. In the beginning of Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, it says 70 weeks are declared for your people in your city to, put an end to sin, to all these things. There's a lot of them. We'll go through this more in future videos, but this is an overview, right? And so anyway, all these things fulfilled in Jesus. And I'm like, what? If that's the case, then like, what's the end? What's the end going to be, right? So what's really interesting is the end is going to be religious nationalism. And I say that because if you look at Revelation, it talks about a whore, the whore of Babylon riding on top of a beast. Well, the whore of Babylon, always a woman in prophecy, is signifying body believers, right? And so you have the bride, the virgin, right? And then you have the whore, or the prostitute, the one that's unfaithful, whoring after other gods, right? And so it's always a picture of like the church or a body believers. And so when you have whore, prostitute going after other gods, that's a counterfeit, right? And so we have this counterfeit on top of a beast, which is a system. It's a system of governing, right? And so you have this, and she's drunk with the blood of the saints. And it also has the 1260 day, which prophetic days are actually years in that. And so what's really interesting about that is it lines up perfectly with the time frame that the Catholic Church reigned with an iron fist. And this is what I didn't realize. I didn't know about the Reformation. I didn't know about the Inquisition and all these things. Like, it is blowing my mind, honestly, how much I've learned about the Catholic Church and its history and how it lines up with all of these things. But basically, prior to the French Revolution, when there was, the establishment of the Catholic Church, the Pope was always seen as infallible. Like he's the vicar of Christ, which means in place of Christ, which is literally antichrist. They would call him, like he had a title, Dominum Deum Nostrum Papa, which means our Lord God the Pope. Like, yeah, he literally thinks he's God on earth. He wears the triple crown, or he did, which it talks about Jesus wearing in Revelation. And so there's all these things. He's seated between two cherubim in his, like, snake orchestra hall. Like, if you look at what it actually looks like, it looks exactly like a freaking snake. Like, it's so obvious for people that have eyes to see. Okay. Anyway, all that happened, and then the Reformation happened, the French Revolution. People prior to that, people didn't know the word. They didn't read. They weren't able to read it in their own language. It wasn't in their own language. They couldn't read, whatever. Then the printing press happened. These translations started to go out. People started to wake up and realize that the Catholic Church is this beast system, right? They recognized that, and so that was a big problem for the Catholic Church. So in order to counter the Reformation, they created the Counter Reformation, which includes all these other crazy eschatology, end times views, including the one where the Jews are the focus, where Israel's the focus, where there has to be a third temple. There's nothing in the Bible that talks about a third temple being rebuilt. It's talking about a spiritual reality. It's talking about a spiritual temple. We are all living stones. Peter said that. Okay, so we are in the New Testament. Body of believers is Israel. And that's the truth. And that makes perfect sense. It's the people who follow God, who wrestle with God, just like Jacob did when he was given that name, And so it's not about anything except those who are elect, who God has chosen to save. And if he has chosen to save you, he will make it happen. And you can rest in that, knowing that God is sovereign and he's in control. No matter what the enemy tries to use for evil, God will use for good. And so, yeah, we are living right now, though, in times of great deception. There's so much deception around us, and basically how the enemy works is he uses a dialectic to try to trick us, right? So you have the obvious evil over here, like what we've been dealing with, so much evil in this world, obvious evil, right? But then you have the savior. Okay, who's the savior right now? Trump, right? Oh, golden age, all these things. Yeah, so we lift up, oh, this is the light. This is the good thing that's going to save us. But really, that's a false light. And he's a Judas goat, and he's bringing us into our ultimate destruction. So all this AI stuff that they're promoting with Palantir, and it's all going to set up the system that will, monitor your every move, enforce worship. Who knows? But yeah, so the U.S. is the false prophet in Revelation. The false prophet sets up the image of the beast. The image of the beast is a picture, representation of what it was. What it was prior to the French Revolution, when the Catholic Church ruled like a god king over even the kings of the day. Like they could, if kings didn't fall in line, they would get excommunicated, and there was all sorts of, I guess, terrible things involved in that, including like people who actually wanted to follow God and, follow Jesus, and biblically, when they didn't want to bend the knee to the church, the Catholic Church, like they were persecuted. So many people are persecuted. And, we don't think about that. We don't know that because we weren't told that, because history is written by the winners, right? And so, anyway, the beast got its seemingly mortal wound in the French Revolution, but it is healing. And it says that in Revelation as well. And I would love love the opportunity to be able to share more in depth on these things with you. I want to get into the word with you. I want to show you exactly, what these things are showing me. And I want to just be able to share this discernment with others, this information that I feel so strongly about. But it's not an easy conversation to have, right? Because people are so stuck in their comfortable dialectics, their comfortable paradigms where, everything they believe is true and, they can't be challenged. And it's really sad because there's so much amazing things we can learn if we are just open to the scriptures and not just stuck in someone else's interpretation of them. The more that I read the word, the more it comes alive, the more things that I gain from it. Like typology, how all these things in the Old Testament, are pointing to Jesus or pointing to spiritual realities that we have in the New Testament, like the rapture, for instance. I don't believe the rapture is going to happen. I don't believe we'll be taken up until the end, but I do think that God will supernaturally protect us, like he protected the Israelites from the plagues, like he protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, or Daniel in the lion's den. They were in it, but they were protected from it. And I think that's what God will do in the end, for those who have been sealed by the Holy Spirit. But I want you to remember that religion does not save you. Religion, especially Catholicism, which is not Christian, it's actually not, because let's be honest, when they Christianized Rome brought their idols with them. Their goddess, the Queen of Heaven, Ishtar, and now they call her Mary. They pray to her. It's the same thing. All these saints, I mean, they claim that, it's, just veneration or whatever, but no, that's idolatry is what that is. And it's interesting because the Catholic Church did change the commandment about idolatry, about not making images, and they took it out for some reason, and then they made thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife and your neighbor's stuff two separate things, which is weird. I don't know why they would do that, except for that they love their idols. And so what I'm saying is that religion is not going to save you. Going to church isn't going to save you. It's about a relationship. It always was. It was supposed to be the way, the narrow road, right? Not to the right or to the left, not getting involved in all the chaos that's all around us, pulling us into politics and pulling us into, just the dialectic of all the news, all the craziness that's happening. We need to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. We need to be in the Word. We need to draw near to him because he will protect us, right? He is our hope. He's our only hope. And so I hope that you will walk with me through this journey on the narrow road. This is just the beginning. I feel very convicted to share this message, and hopefully this video actually recorded, because I did this once already and it didn't have any sound, so hopefully this works out. But I'm going to share this, and I hope you'll listen, or thank you for listening if you've been listening this long. But I just, there'll be more to come. I would really like to get into the Word and go through it with you. And if there's anybody who wants to meet and talk about this stuff, please reach out. I would love to meet more people who are open to these ideas. Thank you again for listening. God bless.